All right. Hello and welcome. My name is Kristin Livingstone, and I'm a nonprofit executive director currently based in Idaho. Many of us work hard to craft a compelling impact story inside a grant application. We know how important that story is. It humanizes our data, it builds emotional connection, it strengthens our case. But here's the question that I want to explore today. What happens to that story after you hit submit? Funders don't only encounter our organizations in proposals. They may see our social media. They may attend our events. They may know someone who is on our board or is a volunteer. So the real question isn't just, can you write a strong impact story? It's, is your organization telling that story consistently across every communication channel? Today, I'm going to share three things. What has worked for us? We're a medium-sized regional organization. How we gather and store impact stories so that we're ready, so that they are ready when we need them, and how we customize the same story across different communication platforms. I lead a medium-sized regional nonprofit. We serve adult learners and families. We serve over 500 students annually with a very lean team and more than 300 volunteers. Early on, we realized that storytelling couldn't live only in development. If it did, we were constantly scrambling before deadlines. What worked for us was building a simple cycle: notice, circulate, amplify. I'll walk you through each step. The most important storytelling skill isn't writing, it's noticing. And noticing is not a development function, it's not an executive director function, it really is a cultural practice. At our organization, everyone notices. Teachers notice when a parent uses English confidently for the first time. Staff notice when a former student walks back in years later, not for services, but to give back. And board members notice when they hear a story that sticks with them. When storytelling becomes cultural, people begin looking for impact. And once you start looking, you see it everywhere. It's like when you decide you want to buy a specific car and suddenly you see that car on every street. The car was always there, your awareness shifted. Now that storytelling is embedded in our culture, I don't have to hunt for stories alone. I simply remind the team what kinds of stories we're looking for: a moment of growth, belonging, courage, skill building. And because everyone is paying attention, stories surface constantly. Noticing is the foundation. And once people are trained to see impact, the rest of the cycle becomes possible. Once stories are noticed, they need to move. At our organization, circulation happens in two directions: top down and bottom up. At the board level, I send a short impact story every other week, along with key updates. This keeps impact top of mind between meetings for the busy executives that serve on our board. And at board meetings, one board member shares a story they've heard in our community, something that reflects how our work is being perceived or experienced externally. And that brings the impact back down into the room. At staff meetings, storytelling is built in. We share a key story that resonated that month, sometimes one that the board responded strongly to, and sometimes one from within a program. This keeps the narrative aligned across all leadership levels. What I'm constantly reminded of, though, is that our team is busy, so storytelling has to be simple. We treat storytelling as celebration. Staff share wins via email, often just one or two sentences that is sent from their phone between classes. A student passed her practice exam today, or a parent volunteered to read to the class for the first time this month. These are small celebrations, but they're acknowledged and then they're reinforced. And because we celebrate them, they become available for use beyond a single classroom or a site. To create accountability, we rotate quarterly program reports among staff. Each report includes at least one deeper story tied to program outcomes. As the person who shares stories most frequently, I keep a simple Excel document where I tag stories by strategic theme and then track where they've been used. That way, when a grant opportunity arises, I'm not searching for a story. I'm curating one from a library. Circulation doesn't happen accidentally. It happens because you build it into whatever your existing rhythms are. So let me give you a real example. When a former student came back and made a donation, it could have remained a nice moment for one staff. Instead, it was circulated amongst our entire team. And then other team members shared memories of that family, and these small details surfaced. And we realized this wasn't just a donation story, it was a generational impact story. That single moment became a donor conversation, a newsletter feature, a full family story recorded on film, the centerpiece at our 800-person fundraising event, an example used in a grant defense, and short clips shared on social media. It was one story. It was approximately a 3-minute interaction, but it became months of communication across all channels. Because when we treat stories as assets rather than one-time anecdotes, amplification becomes natural. So let's talk about customization. How do you use the same story in multiple places without it feeling repetitive? You use 4 simple shifts. Shift the emphasis, shift the data density, shift the length, and shift the call to action. For example, in a grant application, you might emphasize the measurable outcomes, the skill gains, the income mobility, retention data. The tone is very formal. The call to action is funding expansion. But in a board update, that same story is emphasizing sustainability and strategy. In a volunteer recruitment email, we're emphasizing agency, saying you can be a part of this. In a newsletter, we're emphasizing hope and belonging. On social media, we hopefully distill it into one clear emotional insight. We never change the truth, but we do change the lens. So let me return to where we started. Funders don't only encounter our organizations in a proposal. They encounter us in our newsletters, on social media, at our events, through our board members, and in conversations that we don't even know are happening. So the question isn't, can you tell a compelling story in a grant application? It's, is your organization consistently telling the same impact story everywhere? When you build a culture that knows how to notice impact, when you create structures that circulate those stories internally, and when you amplify them intentionally across channels, you're no longer scrambling to add a story to a proposal. You're reinforcing a narrative that funders have already seen, heard, and begun to trust. And what we know is that trust built through consistency is what really moves those funding decisions. Storytelling is reinforcement, it's reputation, and I would argue that it's a needed culture. So thanks for being here with me today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.